Let's get to the story of the day. During the week of September 1, 2018, I experienced stomach discomfort. It got worse despite my use of antacids, laxatives, baking soda, and water. I wasn't feeling well and was bloated. I was only able to sleep on my right side by the end of the week. I struggled to breathe on the evening of September 7 and spent the night sleeping while leaning over the kitchen counter while stand up. I begged my husband to take me to the emergency room as breathing became more and more difficult. I thought it was a bowel obstruction and didn't want to call an ambulance to the house for something like that because my son is a paramedic in our city. I started having serious breathing problems on the way to the hospital and was gasping for air. I was terrified. I was unable to exit the car when we arrived at the hospital because I was out of air. I was immediately wheeled into the emergency room by hospital staff after they sprinted to the car to get me. I was unable to breathe because I was having trouble getting air into my lungs. I became anxious. Around 6 or 7 nurses, doctors, and medical professionals surrounded me as I was being wheeled on the gurney. I began to be undressed as IVs were inserted into my body. Then I vanished. I was in the emergency room in less than a second. I then found myself in a room with stone walls right away. This most closely resembles a great hall in a medieval castle in my opinion. In the center of the room was a lengthy wooden table. 3 white plates were arranged on the table, one on each side and one at the end. Eating utensils and goblets completed the table settings. The table was empty of any food. Sconces burning on the walls illuminated the table. Our Lord Jesus Christ was seated at the end of the table and facing me when I arrived. I was silent throughout. I became aware that I could clearly see each and every hair on his head and beard as I stare at him. He was dressed in a simple white robe. He exactly matched the image of my grandmother that hung in our house when I was a child. Jesus had a beard, dark hair, and sympathetic eyes. I took a deep breath and realized that I could breathe beautifully after realizing I could see clearly. I also had no pain. I peered at the door, over from Jesus' left shoulder. The entrance resembled the restaurant's wooden swing door. My father, my dear father, who had passed away many years earlier at the age of 57 from a severe heart attack that occurred while he was sleeping, entered through the door. He appeared incredible. He had regained his health, was radiantly attractive, and was joyful. I experienced the most amazing love when my eyes met his. I've never experienced that level of love from anyone on earth. All at once, I felt love envelop me in every cell in my body. The most amazing, unadulterated love, light, and warmth filled the space. I caught a glimpse of a glowing bright light behind the door as he entered. The more important thing was seeing my father. I was about to yell, "Dad," and sprint over to give him a big hug. Jesus extended his hand to me and said, "Not now," in a kind but firm manner. Jesus never spoke aloud, but I could hear him clearly in my head. I returned to my body right away. I found myself completely unable to breathe as I was about to be placed into a CAT scanner. I was holding my chest while attempting to pull the tech. "We're almost finished, honey. Just 1 more minute." Then I collapsed. A little more than a day later, I was in the cardiac intensive care unit and had no idea why I was there. I just woke up there. I don't recall being taken there. I had IV needles in my hands, ankles, and the crook of my arm, as well as some sort of oxygen mask covering my face. They informed me that I had heart failure while my family was gathered around me. My kidneys, lungs, and heart were beginning to fail. They informed me that the on-call cardiologist said I wouldn't have survived if I had arrived 10 minutes later. I was stunned. I believed my stomach was blocked. I would have never imagined that I would experience heart failure in my wildest dreams. I had never undergone surgery and was only 58 years old. They performed a cardiac catheterization through my groin on September 11. The doctor informed me that it wasn't a plumbing problem, but rather an electrical one. I was given the following diagnosis: left bundle branch block, pulmonary hypertension, and heart failure. Since having an ICD pacemaker and defibrillator implanted to control my heartbeats, I'm doing great. I don't have pulmonary hypertension anymore. Since I met my dad and Jesus face to face, this experience has taken on a whole new meaning. What followed was, in my opinion, truly amazing, and I would like to share it. They informed me that 2 doctors had argued over whether to intubate me or use the oxygen machine with the mask over my face as they gathered around my hospital bed with my husband and my 4 children, ages 26 to 39. The medical professional who opposed intubating me in the ER won the debate. He later explained to me that it was because your lungs become very weak if you ever need to undergo intubation again after the first time. I was appreciative that he had been able to bring oxygen and a ton of diuretics back with him, so that I could resume functioning. They flushed about 15 pounds of fluid from the area around my heart, lungs, and kidneys. The strangest peace enveloped me during this time while my family was huddled around my bed, sobbing and terrified. This peace lasted for almost 8 months after the event. I had never experienced anything like this in my entire life. My entire mind and body were at peace. I used to smoke, but I didn't want to anymore. It appeared as though I had never smoked. I responded, "No, I don't need one," when the nurses asked if I wanted a nicotine patch. The children continued to express their fear for me, and I repeatedly assured them that I was fine and would be fine. Since I was still in shock from the entire experience, I didn't tell them that Jesus had sent me back. I had complete faith in my ability to handle the situation. The oddest thing, though, was that there was another person in the room as they gathered around my bed over the course of the 3 days I spent in the ICU. A man wearing jeans, biker boots, and a t-shirt had entered. He was nearly 60 years old, about my age. He pushed a step ladder up against the wall after bringing it through the door. Then he rose up on it and started scribbling penciled sentences across the wall. He would write for a while, pause, and reflect before continuing. 3 days passed during this. Although I couldn't see what he was writing, I could still feel it. He was recording every choice he'd ever made in his life as he prepared to pass away. Since he didn't believe he was deserving of heaven, he was evaluating them to see if he'd made the right choice. He nodded his head on the 3rd day. He was happy with every choice he'd made in life. He grinned before stepping onto the ladder and entering a door. I observed as he passed the room to which mine was connected, which wasn't being used as a bed-equipped hospital room. It contained tables and a chair. I was perplexed as to why this man received no attention from the medical staff, nurses, my family, or the housekeeping staff. He was another person in my room. I could see his face and his clothes clearly. I couldn't respond when people asked me why I was gazing at the wall. Before I left the room 4 days later, I questioned the nurse about why they didn't use the adjacent room as a hospital room. She gave me an odd look before stating that it had previously been a regular hospital room and that they now use it as a break room. My son questioned how I was able to know that. I told him about the man who was writing on the wall in that room. I informed him that I was able to see inside that room when the man opened the door. My son told me I couldn't talk about it any longer after getting very upset with me. He believed I was experiencing an ICU psychosis. He threatened to admit me to the psychiatric ward if I didn't keep my mouth shut. He advised me and I was later sent home. Every day, I read the obituaries in the local paper. I browsed the obituaries online when I got home. The man who was in my room was in the obituaries, and I could see his picture there. He was a motorcyclist, according to the report, and was found dead in a hospital in another neighborhood after a crash. On the 3rd day I was in the ICU, he passed away. I was in utter disbelief. Since having my NDE, I've had a strong connection to the afterlife, and I sometimes feel as though I have one foot in heaven and one here on earth. No longer easily rattled, I no longer put up with those who waste my time with foolishness. I don't understand why Jesus sent me back. Since my hospital stay, I've definitely not made much of a contribution. I had terrible memory problems after my heart attack and for a few months afterwards. When I went to begin a sentence with someone, I would find myself speechless. I was so upset by this that I questioned the cardiologist about it. He claimed that because I was unable to breathe, My brain had lost oxygen and blood. I should begin to regain my memory, he said, adding that this is what caused the memory loss. About 3 months later, I was able to regain my memory. However, the only vivid memory I had was of my visit to Jesus, my father, and the man in the hospital room. Over the past few years, I've questioned why I didn't experience a typical NDE that includes a tunnel, flower fields, a bright light, etc. After 4 years, I've realized that, as someone of Italian descent, the table and food are the center of everything. Around the table, we eat, converse, laugh, and cry. Jesus knew that I would understand when he raised his palm toward me as if to extend his hand to me. I had signaled to my children that I had had enough with my hand. I was aware that if he said to me, "Not now, go back," I would protest and want to stay, especially when I saw my father. Jesus was adamant enough about this that I didn't contest it and immediately returned to my childlike body. Since having this experience, I've experienced incredibly vivid dreams that have featured lengthy conversations with my deceased father, my deceased grandmother, and my unborn grandson. These are very dissimilar from a typical dream. I've learned crucial information, and I haven't forgotten these exchanges like I would if it was just another dream. In the 4.5 years since this experience, I've thought a lot about it from all angles. I was glad that I had the experience, but worried I wouldn't get into heaven. I'm still unsure if this means I won't be able to go to heaven with my father and Jesus when my time on earth is up.